Well, good evening. Finally, we made it live on this Facebook Live chat. Just a little bit of the technical thing before I get into the subject on what's the point this evening. This evening, I have a total different configuration in my technology here. First, I split my network up, so I have my modem going out to the internet provider, and then I have my own enclosed network systems. So I don't know how this is going, how all three are going to go, but I think I've did things right. So if you can hear me and I'm sounding okay, then I've gotten to that point. So just let me know how the voice is coming through, and if it's a-okay, then I'll proceed. Okay, the why I'm on air tonight is a result of an early message that I received somewhere around 2 o'clock early this morning, and it had to do with the Kinder Morgan pipeline protest in BC. Is what it has had to do with. And now I'm going to have a cheat sheet with me here because there's points that I want to talk to about, and I call these talking points. Anyway, basically what has transpired in the last couple days, Green Party leader Elizabeth May and NDP MP, oh boys, I just had his name there, Kennedy Stewart, were both arrested and detained during this protest. And this was at Barnaby. Anyway, they were pulled out, and as well, there was about 100 other people that were yanked out and arrested, but we don't know how long those other people were detained and arrested for. All we know that there was about 100 other people besides the Green Party leader and the NDP representative. And that, so this whole dispute goes back to the tar sands, right? I mean, they failed to get the Eastern Pipeline to here to the Atlantic, so now they're trying to go through the West Coast to get their product out. But BC is being resistant, and Alberta has incidentally threatened BC that if they don't comply, they're going to shut their oil off. Whether that's an idle threat or it's very real, that's something to know. But anyway, for us Easterners, we may not quite know what area that we're talking about here about this pipeline going from Edmonton to Victoria. So we're going to move on, and anyway, I'm going to explain this map out. The Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline route spans from Edmonton down to Vancouver, and as we can see from the map, I mean, it covers quite a stretch of territory. Let's zoom up on this just a bit, but before I go on, the red is a proposed new pipe site, and the kind of shaded out is the reactivation of existing pipes. Well, there's issues regarding the reactivation of existing pipes because, one, they were done a long while ago, and there are concerns that the integrity of these older pipelines may not be up to par, but of course this is all about money, so who gives a rat's ass, right? So let's zoom up on this, and this is what the protest is about. So we'll start. I'll zoom up a little bit up here. So we see from our tar sands in Edmonton, it crosses right over, and what's interesting is that the proposed reactivation is probably in the worst part of the country, right through the mountains. Yeah, common sense tells you something right there. So we'll follow down, goes down through the mountains, and there's a little spot here of restoration, and it takes us right down to Vancouver. Now, mind you, over right here we have Washington State, right? A kind of a jagged border, and well, let's look at some common sense. Well, can they transport oil through this little stretch? I don't know that region, so I don't know if it can be done or not. And from the size of the map, it doesn't tell you too much, but most likely if they're going to transport oil to the on the Pacific side, it's going to be somewhere in this area here. Now keep in mind, if there's an issue, an oil spill or a tanker going aground or whatever, we have United States. And of course, we know that Trump hasn't been too kind to Canada. So that a Canadian spill going into American waters could spill trouble. Sorry for the little time delay. Their phone call just come in. The phone rang, and anyway, I had to mute it because I can't hear the phone and talk at the same time. Yes, Amanda Boucher. Not on this episode. I'm not going to talk about the poisons in the spraying in NB because one, I have to be briefed on to it myself and get to understand it. Last thing I want to do is sound like a conspiracy theorist. Okay, the little map that we're looking right in front, this is actually the disputed area that where the arrests have taken place. And if we take a look down the bottom right, you'll see on your screen, I guess it'd be bottom left. I know it changes relative to my screen and relative to your screen. It's two different but I've got hopefully you can see my pointer. I'm on an A. B, this is where the issues have come. Now this is where the injunction was put in place. The protesters were not supposed to be within a certain area. I forget the numbers behind it, but anyway, what Kinder Morgan did, they called in the police, the RCMP, and said that the protesters were in violation of the court injunction. So an arrest has come forth. Now the next clip is thanks to CBC, courtesy of the CBC, and this is the following the arrest of the Green Party leader Elizabeth May.
I'm now charged. I have never before put my signature on a line that said signature of accused, but my rights have been read to me, and I will return to court June 14th.
What are you charged with?
I'm charged with civil contempt for blocking the road.
So she mentions something in there, in that civil contempt. What does civil contempt actually mean? Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I am not going to get too much into the legalities of it, but to give a general description. You have really two types of contempts of court. One is a civil contempt, and the other one is the criminal contempt. Well, obviously, she wasn't charged with criminal. She was just charged with civil contempt. And so let's expand. I'm going to read this right out of the text because it's the wording, and I want to be sure that I have it right, and that so I don't put in my own interpretations, which sometimes I'm guilty of. Bad boy. I shall not give one's own interpretation. It always leads you down the wrong path. Anyway, so let's take a look at civil contempt. Civil contempt is a disobedience of judgments, orders, and other processes of the court that involves private injury. Private injury. So, what's her face there? Kinder Morgan are saying, "Well, the protesters are going to do some damage to us," and that where's our list? Telephones are the worst friggin' distractions that you can imagine when you're on air. I forgot to disconnect the main phone, so I'm going to try to retrace my thoughts to where I was at. So okay, so we're at the civil contempt. So we'll expand onto that. So if we move with that, it's a proceeding for civil contempt of court, and it's available to redress a private wrong by forcing compliance with an order for the benefit of the party whose favor the order was made. So, I mean, that's Kinder Morgan all the way. So one of the things I've got to address now, we're starting to see the laws kicking in on behalf of the big old corporations. Now, I'm not going to be addressing Kinder anymore. I'm going to be going into a general discussion on how the laws are written to support what I call the ruling class, as the financial institutions, the political, the corporations, the money people. I'm going to refer to them as the elite. And one of the things that has been passed, and it was Stephen Harper who first brought it in, and it was called Bill C-51, which was assented to, and it's now law. Yes, it's now law for us Canadians. And Bill C-51 had the G20 written all over it, and the Rexton riots written all over it. Now, I say that just recently I've been doing some research on a murder that had taken place just outside of Barker's Point in 1949, and the results of that, it was the last 2 hangings here in Fredericton. But during that year, I follow from January of 49 to December of 49. And in the headlines and bylines, I've seen more references to acts of terrorism than what I've seen from 1960 to the present. So what was that shit all about that Stephen Harper was talking about with all these big bad terrorists? The incidences were no greater in 2014 than they were in 1949, right? But I'm going to again read kind of verbatim about with the passing of Bill C-51. See, the definition of what constitutes a terrorist offense has been expanded, but it's vaguely defined, so it's difficult to know whether a demonstration or a protest is an act of terrorists, or if you could be supporting an act of terrorists. That's the problem with Bill C-51, and it's written in a vague way, and I know how this fucking system works. I should have beeped that out, I guess. They write laws, they write them ambiguous. It's like the law of public interest, right? Well, in the Kinder Morgan, the RCMP, and Kinder Morgan and the Rexton riots, the RCMP are there. Whose interest, public interest, are they looking after? Are they looking after Swin's interest during the Rexton riots? And with the BC, are they there looking after the interests of Kinder Morgan to serve and protect and public safety? They're very loose-ended terminology that, depending who you are, you can adjust a context to it. But this Bill C-51 is just another mechanism to control demonstrators and protesters. Now, this is nothing new. We can go back to the whole labor movement, and at each stage we see legislation taking away the powers of unions. And unions and protesters have a lot in common. They share the same kind of ground, and that ground is that they're requiring something, they're demanding something, they want an end result. Well, I'm one who believes in the balance of power. Yes, if you're going to have fair negotiation, I have to have a red button that can destroy you and destroy myself at the same time. You have to have a red button that can destroy you and me at the same time. Then you can negotiate. But if one party has more power than the other party, you can't have negotiation. And this is what's happened, from what I've seen since 1970 to the present, how they've brought up legislation that were targeted for union demonstrations, but they're later expanded for protests at all, for the general public. I mean, lawful assembly, right? I mean, we get into some pretty crazy kind of stuff that, you can pull straws out of the hat and you can get court actions, and you can make it a real pain in the ass and life really miserable for the demonstrators. So I am not going to go on too much. Like I said, I have to thank JS. I usually don't identify my sources because some people just don't want to be known, and that makes sense because we live in a society that if you speak out, you question, you get penalized. Either you get locked out of a job or you get fired. Actually, you got a better chance of getting a job if you have a criminal record than if you're a social activist. Trust me, that's I know many social activists that are living the world of poverty. So on that note, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated having you guys on. I'm just going to take a quick lull to to see if there's any other questions that's come up. John Thibodeau, I guarantee you this is live. I did mix some pre-recorded clips into it, but hey, I'm live on The Real McCoy. This hasn't been recorded 2 days ago. So yes, it is live, and in future broadcasts I will always mix to get the story across. I will always mix some pre-recorded and live, and that's the only way to do it, because I'm one person. I can't run a full control panel all by myself. I have to simplify it down that just me, myself, and I can run the whole system. So once again, I appreciate you guys turning on, and on that questions on poison and spraying and NB, I will sometimes in the future research that out, and I will do a show. And if you have any topics of any kind, inbox me. Let me know, and if it's something that I can research and find something out, I'll definitely make a show out of it. And you great New Brunswickers, thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time, God bless. Take care.